I'm glad you've all signed up for this webinar. It's a really important one. So Cibo Labs, Alastair Rayner and Phil Tickler, the two guys from Cibo Labs that I've now worked with for, God, years, hasn't it, Alastair? It's been actually, when I was working for Meat and Livestock Australia, Al and I worked together, not when he was with Cibo Labs, but Al's got some really great knowledge around cattle genetics, feed management. And so him now working with Phil Tickler and the Cibo Labs team has been a perfect fit. So look, let's get into this webinar and celebrate that we're going into Christmas. And I think, I can't speak for the whole of Australia, it's a big country, isn't it? But I think a lot of our areas have got some reasonable feed at the moment. It's getting a bit dry in some places, but that's a good thing. And it's a good time to be actually looking at this AFM, because what this thing is about, and Alastair will explain it much more because he knows a lot more about it than I do, is just helping you manage your feed on your property. So it's an important thing to be able to do. The aim of this webinar is to provide an intro to the AFM, the Australian Feedbase Monitor, and in this session, Al's going to step through introducing new users to this tool, including creating an account and any issues that might be associated with the MLA membership for free access. And look, I've been around that. I do remember being at Richmond at a field day and helping a number of producers to sort of sign up for the MLA portal, and then the subsequent thing to that is the AFM. So Al's going to help with that, and then also for non-MLA members, just explain how to access the AFM, and then he'll go through a lot more detail about the AFM and its strengths and what you would use it for. My name's Angela Hammond, and I manage the Landcare Farming Program for Landcare Australia. And so that program is managed by the National Landcare Network and Landcare Australia, and it's designed to support primary producers all over Australia. It's important to know that. I think some of our agricultural people think that Landcare is sort of just coastal and coast care and things like that, but no, we have a branch that's specific to agriculture, and that's why we work with organisations like Cibo Labs to support our primary producers, to help them with all of these ever-changing things in our industry currently. We've been lucky enough to work with Cibo Labs, Landcare has, over the years, and so it's been good to come together and combine the forces to present this session, just to support you guys and help you to use this great resource better. Look, if you've got any questions during the webinar, can you put them in the chat as we go along, and then Al will address these at the end. And also at the end, if other questions come up, you can turn your camera on and your microphone and actually physically ask those questions. But for most of them, if you can put them in the chat, please. Now, look, we're recording this session, so please let us know if you don't want to be recorded. And what we would like to be able to do is put this recording up on the Landcare Farming website, and then we'll share it with you guys. And that way, if you've got any colleagues that you think would be interested, you can share it with them. But look, let me know if there's any problem with that. We're happy to not do that if you don't want us to. Look, I'm usually sitting in Kamilaroi country, which is where I'm originally from, which is Gadooga is where I'm originally from. I'm now at Inverell, but it's a part of the world that the Kamilaroi tribe, the Aboriginal tribe, the Kamilaroi manage and own, well, not manage and own, have been there forever. So if all of you can just acknowledge where you're from and the land that you're from, and as I said before, just put where you are from in the chat so that Al can see that. So with no further ado, thanks everyone for getting on to this webinar, and I'm going to hand over now to Alastair so he can empower you on your journey to use this fantastic resource, the Australian Feedbase Monitor. Thanks. Over to you, Al.
Thanks, Angela. Good morning, everyone. Just before we begin, can I ask Stuart and Rhiannon, if we can get you to turn your cameras off, please? That'll make life a bit easier for us with the connectivity, given that we've got people scattered around the country. Thank you for making the time this morning. My name's Alastair Rayner, and I'm the Extension Manager for Cibo Labs. I also operate a consultancy, Rayner Ag, and so I contract to Cibo to do the national extension work that we do. So today is an opportunity to take you through a number of different projects, and I'm going to share my screen with you now, and I've got a few sessions to show you to start with, but where we might just start, I think, is just giving you a little bit of an overview of where the Australian Feedbase Monitor is sitting and how you use it, and also why you would use it. But then also, if we can then, I guess, spend a little bit of time understanding who Cibo is. So Angela has given us a little bit of an introduction. Cibo is a I guess, a fairly young company in terms of where we sit within the landscape. We were started by two people, Phil Tickle and Peter Scarth, Dr. Peter Scarth, in 2018, and their background is in this use of satellite imagery and machine-based learning to actually make better landscape decisions and better decisions about managing our landscape that we actually have. Their background within government probably was a little bit frustrating for them, in that they were hoping to see a greater uptake of satellite imagery by producers, by land managers, and that wasn't quite happening to the extent that that they hoped. And so, in establishing Cibo Labs, they were able to actually go out to a much broader agricultural community and a land management community. And we now support a number of different national projects. So our bread and butter is our pasture monitoring service through our PastureKey subscription service, and through our National Australian Feedbase Monitor, which is a joint partnership with MLA, and I'll speak to that in a minute. But we also support and underpin a number of really important industry projects, such as the Australian Beef Sustainability Framework and the Sheep Sustainability Framework, in collecting the metrics around landscape management and landscape usage. And we can also then provide quite a lot of high-level data to producers and to industry supply chains who are looking to try and really establish and build into their frameworks of supply the provenance of food, but also the sustainability of how food is produced, particularly through livestock. And so we're working very closely with a number of industry bodies to do that. So it's a really exciting space to be involved in, and one that's changing very much. But fundamentally, our bread and butter is really to provide producers with the ability to actually make much more accurate decisions and much more timely decisions about how they manage their livestock and how they manage their pastures. And so where I sort of thought about today, and where we started today, was that that for a lot of us, we're really in this concept of having a balancing act. And the balancing act that all of us as livestock managers or graziers and land managers face is how we actually manage to balance the needs of our livestock against the needs of sustainable management, so that we can actually ensure that our livestock achieve their daily intake of energy and protein, but also at the same time we don't create a situation where we're impacting upon the species that we have, the ground cover that we want to preserve, but also to meet other expectations around our land management that we all are responsible for. And to do that, I guess, really comes down to how effective our decisions are. And to be really effective as a decision requires timely and accurate data, and to use that data in a way that we can actually then go on and make some strategic and tactical decisions about our landscape. And the concept of making better decisions, every day we make decisions about our land and our livestock. And decisions are really not made in a vacuum. And I talk to a lot of producers around the country about their livestock, whether it's from a strategic point of view in terms of marketing, or in terms of things like drought management or different outcomes. And those decisions that people make are made using a range of information and ideas and experiences that come in. But better decisions and the best decisions are the ones that are made when the information that is used is accurate, when it's reliable, when it's objective, and when it's repeatable. And for a lot of people, particularly graziers, that's a real challenge. It's not that we're not necessarily accurate, or not that we're not reliable, but making sure that we actually continue to be accurate and repeatable across the landscape is quite a very big challenge for a lot of people. And traditionally, I guess what starts to happen is we start off with best intentions to collect very accurate data through pasture assessments that require cutting and drying. But then we actually then start to move on to visual assessments that then start to become less formal. And then progressively, those assessments are being made from the back of the ute or from the top of the horse. And those assessments then become less accurate, probably less objective and less repeatable. And so the ability to make better decisions starts to become eroded by doing that. And when we start thinking about why we would do that in the first instance, I guess the concept is that we're making decisions around how we budget the forage that we actually have in front of us. And reliable budgets that we would be using to forecast either numbers of stock to graze to meet an expectation, or days grazing to last within a paddock or a grazing area, really require us to have very good, accurate data. And that requires multiple assessments to make sure that we actually account for both our accuracy, but the variation that exists within a paddock. And the challenge that most people have, and where we progress from those good intentions of doing cuts and formal assessments, is that it is actually a time-consuming undertaking. And there is a lot of difficulty in some places to actually reliably assess across a paddock, across a landscape. And I guess when we keep coming back down to the other reason for forage budgeting and what we actually want to think from in terms of what we want from forage assessments, is we really want to be able to accurately determine a couple of things. Most people are happy with the top 3 points, which is to determine how much feed on offer there is in a paddock, how long it will last stock for, but also how many stock could be run. But I think we can actually do a little bit better in terms of our forage assessments as graziers, to think about, when do our feed gaps occur? Can I match forage with supplements? Am I actually starting to put the timing of my critical management events around the supply of feed that best meet those requirements? From a land manager's perspective, and remembering, I guess, that not all of us are graziers, is that there are also things that we're trying to achieve when we put our management hat on for our landscape. We're thinking about things about ground cover. How do we maintain ground cover or avoid compromising ground cover? What's the history of our ground cover on our location over seasons? And we know that changes fairly significantly depending where you are in the country, depending on the land type that you have, the topography that you operate within, but also the seasonal effect. And it's really important to understand that, because then you can start to understand where your risks are and actually then start to mitigate those risks. And again, having that objective, reliable and consistent information over the entirety of your property is going to allow you to make a much better and more accurate decision and much more effective strategic directions to achieve those outcomes that you're thinking about. And so with this in mind, and given the fact that Cibo for a number of years has been working with land managers to provide very, very accurate imagery of pastures and ground cover, utilising satellite imagery, but also machine-based learning. So taking on-ground ground truthing, using the information that producers are providing with us and matching that with machine learning and the satellite imagery, we're able to provide producers with very, very accurate paddock level data about how much pasture they have, the feed, whether it's green or dead, the ground cover that they have, and to determine changes over time. And that information has become very powerful for those people who've been subscribing to the Cibo service. It's been so powerful that MLA and Cibo then decided to submit and develop a joint project, which is known as the Australian Feedbase Monitor. And for those of you who may have heard about the Australian Feedbase Monitor, we launched this with MLA in November 2022. So it's been in operation now for about 12 months or almost 13 months. It's a $4.7 million co-funded project. And so half of that money has come from Cibo, which is pretty good considering that there's only really 8 people who've been developing the company, and really out of the work of Phil and Dr. Scarth. And we're now looking at then the contribution from the MLA donor company, which is the research money that comes in for projects that's really out of federal government support, not necessarily straight out of your levies. The AFM is freely accessible to all MLA members. So MLA members can access this freely, and they can put their properties onto the system and use it whenever they want to do that. And it's linked through their LPA account which every person who has an NVD or an LPA should have that already operating through their system. But we make sure that we link that across to your MyMLA portal. And so you can then select the land parcels that are associated with your pick, and this will start to generate for you 5 daily updates to give you a 30-day rolling account for a rolling average for each of your picks on your account. In a moment, I'm going to take you through and show you how that actually works. But I guess for a lot of people, that sounds all very impressive. But again, I want to come back to why would you even want to start using the AFM? Remember that that the AFM has a couple of, I guess, limitations as well as some valuable uses for you. The limitation for a lot of people is that it operates on a property level basis of 1 hectare. So the resolution that you get is not sufficient to start to show you individual paddocks or the variation within paddocks. We're really operating across a hectare for the entire land parcel. Now that's quite useful for a lot of people. And if you've never actually seen the variation across your entire land parcel, that will be a real eye-opener for you. In terms of usage then, you can actually then start to zoom from your local level, from your farm level, out to have a look at your regional location and have a look at what's happening regionally, to have a look at your state conditions or even the national conditions. We have a user over in the Gascoyne who recently used the AFM to start to look within his regional area for locations that had better feed than he did, and contacted people in those areas that he knew to see whether there was possibility of adjustment, which he was able to secure based on making a few phone calls to people he knew within a region that had better conditions than he did. So the AFM is quite useful at that level. It's designed to show you current and historical trends for each land parcel based on a monthly comparison of your total standing dry matter. And you can use it to determine that the upper and lower levels of production that you've had across your property from 2017 and onwards. You can also use it to start to generate some benchmark reports, which I'll show you shortly. The first part of using then the AFM or accessing the AFM is to remember that as an MLA user, it's designed to support you around the use and the information that you would need for your individual property. So it's linked to your individual picks, which is linked through your LPA account. It is possible to have multiple picks or farms on the one pick, and we can show you how to do that. But you, as the user, have to take a couple of responsibilities yourself. The first is you need to make sure that you've linked your LPA account within the MyMLA platform. If you haven't done this, and in a minute I'll show you and I'll take you through the MyMLA platform, but you'll need to make sure before you do this that you actually know your LPA user account details, and to make sure that you know what your email address is, and ideally, if you can ensure from the very get-go that your MLA membership and your MyMLA email address are both the same. Because one of the big challenges is that we operate at the Cibo end on the MLA data that we're provided. And that email address is what you may have provided when you joined MLA, and which may be quite different to your email that you're using now, or the email you used to create a MyMLA portal. And I know that sounds a little bit confusing, so I'll show that to you again in a second. When you do go in, and I'll show you how this works, but I want to I guess give you a bit of an overview of what you'll be provided with. The the AFM data that you'll be accessing is based on the resolution of 1 hectare. So it accumulates the data for every hectare within your land parcel. We provide you with a 30-day rolling average, which shows you month-to-month comparisons. We actually then develop a number of graphs which you can use to develop and understand the trends across your property for individual land parcels, but also for the whole of your property. And ideally what this does is to allow you to have year-to-year comparisons and month-to-month comparisons. So now I want to just take you through a live example of how to actually start to use the My MLA account. I'm just quickly checking any of these new messages that just have come in and make sure there's no questions before I get too far. Okay, I'm just going to go across now to stop this show here, and we should be able to see my screen, which is the My MLA page. I'm just going to stop my video for a moment so that you're not distracted by me and my face as we're talking, but you should now be able to see the My MLA website there. I'll just get Angela to make sure, okay, that we're there. Terrific, thanks, Ange. So when you go into My MLA, you'll see that the generic email address is mla.com.au, and you'll notice across here that you have a My MLA login and a My MLA sign up. If you've never actually used the My MLA portal before, then you'll need to sign up, and you sign up by just creating basically an email address and a password and create that account. Now, the challenge for a lot of people here, and this is probably one of the biggest challenges we've had, is that there are two things that people have not appreciated in the first instance. The first is that even though you may pay levies, you may not actually be a member of MLA. To be a member of MLA, you actually have to apply for membership. You can do this online, but you have to fulfill requirements which are associated with actually buying and selling livestock or selling livestock from a farm. And there are some people who are not actually entitled to be an MLA member. Consultants, advisors, and some corporate managers may not actually be the ones who would be the MLA member. The second thing then is to remember that if you have become an MLA member, and you would know whether you are or not, or you can check your membership later on, but a lot of people joined MLA when it was first formed 20 years ago or so, and they joined with an email address which they no longer use. They now might have changed service providers and gone from having a Big Pond account or a Hotmail account to now using Gmail, for example. The challenge is that if you use your new email address in creating your account, that detail will not translate to us. And when you go to access the AFM, you'll be told that you're not seen to be an MLA member. And that is throws a few people out, because then they think that they are, and they get a little bit cranky with it. We can't change that at our end. We need you to contact the MLA membership, and I'll show you how to do that. So for those of you who haven't actually created an account, you can do that, and it's worth doing that. For those of you who've already got an account but may not have looked at this for some time, I'm going to take you through and show you how this account works. So when we open the My MLA account up, you'll notice that the dashboard has changed in the last 3 weeks, and we've got a new version of the dashboard which the MLA has just launched in Gippsland last week. There's a couple of things that are quite useful and really important for you to know, which is worth spending a couple of minutes on. First of all, over here, you'll notice that you've got the option to change your passwords, to update your email address, but also to check your MLA membership. So if you're unsure about your MLA membership, you can actually click on that to see whether you're a member, or to find out if you need to update anything. You can email directly to membership@mla.com.au, or you can contact that number, and they can check whether your email addresses need to be updated on the membership base. The other option up here is the linked services. And the idea with the MLA portal is to actually make sure that we actually link a number of our services so that you sign in just once. But most of you have probably got a number of different options. It could be the LPA, you could have an MSA account, you could be using My Feedback or other services. So you have the option to see what you have linked, or you can actually link a service. If you haven't done this before, it's quite simply a matter of clicking on that particular option. You'll see that I've actually linked in here, and I've linked in with my pics, and I have a pic, I have an email address, and so on that's associated with this. If you wanted to link more services, you can do this easily from the dashboard, where you actually can set up an MLA service. So once you've actually linked these across, then you'll have your data set up ready to go. Now, to find the AFM, if you just scroll down and spend a little bit of time scrolling down, you can see that MLA put quite a few things such as news and events that are coming up that MLA are hosting, latest reports, which you can add for the things that might interest you. And then you'll come down to this section here, which is the Australian Feedbase Monitor. Now, for many people, this is their first introduction to the data that comes out of the AFM. So a couple of things to explain to you, first of all, is that you'll see at the rear, at the end of Australian Feedbase Monitor, this 4 digits here, that's the postcode associated with the location that I have put in under my profile. And for that location 2337, this is the current amount of total standing dry matter for the 30th of November. So on the 30-day rolling average, we haven't got the December data in yet. And we can compare that point against the last few years, going back to 2017, to see how this season has been tracking for the postcode. So it's an opportunity to start to see how your postcode or your local area is performing in terms of season and the amount of feed that might be available. You can change your location, and I have a number of different locations here. Some of you might notice 2370 up on the New England tablelands, 2527 down on the Illawarra coast, 2365 is up in the Hunter Valley. And you can edit your locations and add different locations into this part of the postcode, so that if you were interested in a quick snapshot of some regional areas that you might be interested in, where you might have farms or something like that, and you wanted just a quick snapshot, this is an option for you to actually be able to do that by adding a postcode in through there. The next option then is to actually start to use the Australian Feedbase Monitor. And you'll see that we have a button directly underneath here, which is to take you to the Australian Feedbase Monitor. When you click on that, it will take you through to the Cibo Labs page. Because you've already logged in through your MyMLA account, this will automatically open up for you. You'll notice that then over on the side, over here, I have a number of test farms. They, in your case, would come up to be your pick that might actually be located, the picks that you've linked for your particular farm. They'll be sitting here ready for you to start to set up. What I'm going to do is show you how we set up a farm for a user. I'm then going to show the options for third-party users. But first of all, I'm just going to set up a farm for a particular location. So there are a couple of ways that you can do this. I'll just call this farm my Landcare farm. And I can start to type in an actual address, or if I actually had a digital file that was a JSON or a JSON file, I could actually upload that and would automatically find that location for me. But if I was to type in something like 444 Strathbogie Road, Glen Innes, where I used to work, we could bring up the Agricultural Research Station. And what you'll see is that we have a number of properties, that are a number of land parcels associated with that particular location. Just checking on that. We are recording this, Kate, so don't panic. This webinar is being recorded for you. So when we click on these particular land parcels, so if I was to select this land parcel, and say these two land parcels, or these ones through to here, they would potentially be, for example, my farm. You'll notice that each of those land parcels is and if we wanted to make that through there, okay, so nice and neat. We then have the option of here with this teardrop is where we would call it the front gate. And please don't panic too much about the location of the front gate. It's not actually necessary to have that as such where your front gate is. We use the front gate to bring all the data together when we're looking for whole farm information. So I generally go and put it close to where I think the front gate is, but it doesn't really matter. Once you've done that, we just hit finish setup. You'll notice that it says that I've got other farms to set up. So if you have other picks, you might choose to do that. In this case, I'll just say go to my dashboard. You'll see down the bottom, I have my Landcare farm here. The area in size, 129 hectares, and a couple of options associated with manage and share. First of all, I might show you what we can do in terms of manage. There are plenty of people across the country who have potentially a number of different farms that are not actually contiguously joined and are operated as separate farms, but are operated under the one PIC or the one LPA. So that might be, for example, that we'd like to create an additional farm. If we were to click on this button, it will take us back to ask us then the location of that second farm. So I can then set a second farm up under that if I wanted to. I won't in this instant, but that is an option for some of you to do. In terms then of understanding what you get and what you see when we open this particular app up. First of all, when you click on AFM, you'll see the AFM, it says go to map. So we click on this, and now when you're looking at that, the first thing that most people look at that, they look at that and the pixelations and they go, that looks horrible, I don't understand it, and they close it down as quickly as they possibly can. It's actually quite a useful tool, and once you understand what the tool means, then you'll be able to use it with greater confidence. The first thing that I'll explain is this is reflecting for you the total standing dry matter. So all the green and all the dead material that is standing in that land, in those land parcels, that 129 hectares associated with that farm. Over here is the scale that we operate on. So every square within that, there are 129 squares in this boundary, being 1 hectare for each of those. And each of those has got a colour that ranges from below 250 kilos to over 5,000 kilos. So we go from red, being of concern, through to purple, where we've got plenty of feed to worry about. We report on every area that we can see, unless it's got greater than 80% tree cover. So we don't report on forest areas, and you'll see there's a forest area down there, for example. And even though there is grass growing under those trees, the satellite can't actually calibrate for that. So what we're looking at then is obviously a fairly coarse resolution of every hectare within that property. You might understand where your paddock boundaries are, but generally what we're looking at is that through there, we've got a range that goes from around about 250 to 750 kilos of total standing dry matter, down to this dark green of about 2,000 to 3,000 kilograms of total standing dry matter. Some areas here which are below 250 kilos of total standing dry matter. How we use this, and if I zoom out just a little bit to give you a sense, as I said before, you have the option to zoom out for your region, and you can have a look at what your region is looking like. You can have a look at your larger area to a state, or even to a national perspective if you wanted to do that. The thing is that what you'll notice is we can't necessarily see anyone else's farm. So while you might know who this location is, you don't necessarily know whether you're looking at the neighbour's farm or not. So, and you also doesn't really change anything in terms of you're not seeing whether they've got stocking numbers or anything different to that. So we're really looking at our own location here. Down the bottom, we have a time slider that goes back month by month. So as I said to you, we give you a 30-day rolling average. So if we go back from the 1st of December to the 1st of November, you'll see that there was a slightly large level of dead standing material there. Our season was a little bit tougher on this northern side in October. And you can see how the season has changed over this period of time. This period in June, where we've had no report, meant that we had consecutive cloud cover for greater than 10 to 15 days, which is when our satellites pass. If we don't get a pass on the first every 5 days, the satellite and the machine learning will calculate feed for us. But if we're unable to present the satellite with a clear image after those 2 runs, then we'll have a blank image for that particular period. But what we can see then is we can go back and we can progress all the way back month by month to see how the season might have been looking. We can compare that to something like December 2018, December, when the drought was significant for your location or not. So if we go forward to that, we'll notice that we have all of these land parcels here, and we have a number of them located. If I was to click on any of these land parcels with my mouse, what I will be able to generate is a series of graphs. These charts do 2 things. The graph at the top shows you the range in total standing dry matter for that land parcel. So while you might look at that land parcel and we see that our average is sitting somewhere close to 1,500 kilos of total standing dry matter, or 1,385, 1,400 kilos, at its lowest point, we only have 880 kilos of total standing dry matter, and at its highest point, it's close to 1,800. So there is a significant variation in the amount of feed that exists across that land parcel. Now, that's fine if you're able to work out where your paddocks are, and you might be able to do that. But what that provides you is across that particular land parcel an understanding that you've got a fairly wide range of feed available within that. Looking then at these graphs down below, these show you the month-on-month comparisons for this land parcel from 2023 going back to 2017. And we can look and see how 2023 is actually tracking against some of those other years. And where we look at, say, 2019, which was probably the toughest year, in a lot of ways, the graph and the trend line for 2023 for this particular land parcel is very similar to that of that fairly tough drought year. And this might be useful for you to go back and consider what decisions you made in that drought and whether you should have acted earlier and at what point you might want to act based on that information for that particular graph. However, if we were to choose a different graph or a different land parcel, you can see that our graphs for total and mean standing dry matter and also our total standing dry matter are quite different. And that will be the same for every land parcel because there is variation across each farm. If you are to click on the option of the gate, what we now generate for you is the accumulation of your total amount of standing dry matter for all your land parcels and the average or the seasonal trend for your farm, taking into account all of the land parcels. So you can see that for this particular location, 2023 is pretty much going to be one of the toughest summers that particular location has had for some time. You have the option, if you wanted to choose to download your farm chart data, and this will bring all of this information for you into a CSV file that you can extract and put into your own particular programs. So when we look at this, the idea is to start to look really at the color changes and the trends so that you can start to make some decisions about whether you're looking like you're progressing into a tougher season or whether you're trending a little bit more normal, but also to give you a bit of an idea about where within your particular land parcel you've got more than sufficient feed or less than you need. We have the option also to change the layers that we show you. So we can show you, instead of total standing dry matter, we can show you total ground cover for this particular location. And again, what we see in total ground cover is that we actually have from less than 10% ground cover in the darker color here, through these red warning colors up into these darker blue colors. And you can see those lighter colors where we've got less than 50 or less than 40% cover in the yellows, where we might actually start to be concerned about how that might progress from season to season. And we have producers in Queensland who are using this data now as part of their reef reporting data in order to meet their requirements under that Queensland regulation. So when we return home to the dashboard, we also have this other option here, which is called our farm reports. And you can use this to generate some woody cover vegetation reports or forest carbon reports. And I'll show you an example of those very shortly. I'll just log out of here for a second. In a second, I'll log back in so that I can show you what a third-party users option might actually be. So if I log out of this, to log back in, so you'll see that we have a training account, and we can see that we've actually got options again in terms of our link services. We haven't actually linked any services here. If we were to want to link our LPA, so if this is the first time that you've used it, you would go into link services, click on link service, and you'll see that we've got some of these here that we can start to fill out and actually start to use. So I need to log out of that. It's always a good idea to make sure that you've logged out of these things to start with. So go back to our Cibo, our MLA page. And when we go to link that service, you'll see that that will take you through and actually ask you to log in or register, and you'll start to be able to put your data into doing that if you haven't actually done this already. When we go back to then our Cibo page, we log into our Cibo training page, and then we go down to our Australian Feedbase Monitor. Now, for those of you who are Landcare facilitators or third-party users joining us today, one of the options that you'll see when you come into this is that at the moment, you actually don't have any farms. So you have the option, because of a third-party user, if you haven't created or linked an LPA, you can choose to actually purchase or subscribe. And you'll see over here on this left-hand side, this thing which is called subscriptions. Manage new subscriptions. You'll see that you have the option. For those of you who might want to add a subscription, so you might be actually believe that you're an AFM MLA member, you should be not seeing this. You should already have your subscriptions loaded in. But if you're a corporate manager or a third-party user like an advisor or a stock and station agent, Landcare facilitator, you can choose to actually add in AFM membership if you had access to a particular location, or you can choose to be a third-party subscription, which allows you to add up to 25 farms. So for Landcare users, you might actually choose to do this, which allows you to have 25 farms, which you can then start to actually use and locate within the AFM in the same way that I've showed you just before. So again, you would type your farm details in, and you would then create that farm. So that might be quite useful for those of you who are actually looking to do some Landcare work or to provide some details with your Landcare groups. Alternatively, your Landcare members can actually email you a link and allow you to be able to access their farm data as well. So there are a couple of ways that you can actually utilize the third-party subscription to make the most of the AFM. So once we've looked at the AFM, and really that's what it does for you, that's the capacity of where the AFM actually is at its greatest, is to give you that information. And so as a third-party user, you need to get consent from the landholders before doing this. And that's correct in terms of I can make a farm from any location, but I don't necessarily know whose farm boundaries they are or not. So I can create a farm and do that. This is publicly available information that anyone could use right now. You could purchase a satellite access if you wanted to and do it yourself. So we're not actually using landholders' private data or financial data. What we're actually using is a land parcel that's publicly listed, and that information is publicly available. Most people in this third-party users basis would tend to be starting to use it more from the benefits of, when we're in the Australian Feedbase Monitor, we would start to, if I go back, if I log out of here to sign in with my account. So if I was to create a new farm, I could actually send that farm details to someone that I trusted. So for example, if I was to show you, if I was to log out of this account and go back to my own Rayner Ag email account, so I have my own, obviously my own business here, and I'm quite happy to show you how that might be. So I'll enter my password and log into my MLA. So when that logs in, this is my MLA account, my personal one. You'll see that that's my postcode down here. If I go to the Australian Feedbase Monitor, as a third-party user and as a consultant, I have farms that I have access to. So I have these 2 farms, but you'll see here that I've got these particular farms that have been shared with me by a third party, which is in this case Phil, my boss. But these particular farms where we've been looking to actually run links on, this is a client who's shared something with me. So I won't show you their details, but obviously all I can look at then is their graphs. And to show you, if I use this example, this is the graph of a particular property. You notice no paddocks within that, and we can see then how it's looking as we go. Now, I happen to know that some of those paddocks are actually cropping paddocks. That was cloud cover. This is where that has changed over time. So it is possible to do this, and it's quite easy to start to share that data with you, so that when people who might be a Landcare facilitator might actually encourage the group to do that. It's the user to decide who wants to share it or not. So that's basically how that progresses. So if I go back now to I guess a couple of things to finish off with, and where we actually would go from using that. One of the things that I really wanted to highlight for you is that for many years as advisors and facilitators, we've often encouraged producers to start to try and put their production programs and their key events around their seasonal peaks and troughs. And we often provide those regional averages and those regional peaks and troughs for people, which they've built their calendars around. But what we now know is when we look at those particular locations, and here's an example for you, this is the variation for one farm over 6 years. So we can start to see, I'll come back to your question, Fiona, on Lantana shortly. We can see that those peaks and troughs don't always exactly match up to what would be traditionally the location or the regional average that people work on. So here's an opportunity for you to start to think about how you might make some of your timing decisions around your events to better align with the averages for your particular location. The other option for you is that in terms of developing and using basic simple forage budgets, a very effective forage budget is available in the MLA template, but it requires feed on offer, an understanding of pasture growth, and livestock numbers and class. Now, the starting point where most people really start to struggle with this is actually knowing how much feed on offer they have. Pasture growth, you can do an estimate, or you can look at some regional averages for your location as a guide. But by putting those in, you can start to do some calculations using the information directly out of your AFM account, so that you can then develop your own feed budget to predict how long your paddocks will last. It's a much more effective and efficient way of doing this than having a guess, as most people have often tended to do when they're driving across in their Land Cruisers. When you use the AFM data, think about it as really using it for month-to-month comparisons to start to think about its ability to more help you identify property level feed gaps and surpluses and where that happens, to think about how you might line up your livestock demands more closely to those peaks and troughs. And that then starts to give you some planning opportunities around the need to address the gaps with supplements, or to think about your livestock numbers, particularly pre and post calving, or coming into to joining or particular livestock events. One of the new reports that we'll soon be releasing is this one, which I wanted to show you, which is an example of a property located in central Queensland. What we see here is we're now starting to be able to highlight the impact of rainfall on pasture growth, and also to start to understand the effect and the importance of carryover feed within someone's overall business. What you'll notice here is that we've got cumulative, or the rainfall that has fallen on this location between July 2017 to 2018. So we're doing 12-month increments from July to July. So these are the rainfall events that have occurred during the year. And what you'll see in the green line is where we get actual growth events happening. The buff color is the accumulation of growth that happens as a result of those events and that pasture growth that occurs. But at any one time throughout that year, the total standing dry matter might actually be quite higher than what we would think has grown or has actually accumulated from the previous month, which basically means that these areas here underneath the blue line in here are periods of time where livestock production is reliant on dead standing carryover feed from the previous months, or in some cases previous years. Very useful to know how much of your calendar are you relying on carryover feed from the previous season, and therefore are you actually assuming that your feed is better than it really is. This has been a real eye-opener for a lot of producers that we've shown this to, where they haven't realised that so much of their year they've been relying on the feed that they've grown in the previous spring or the previous autumn to get them through, and that the reason why their livestock often don't perform as well is because they haven't quite appreciated just how low quality the feed is. Now, I've used this report, and these reports will soon be available, to line it up, and I know I've got a few Queenslanders here, so you'd be familiar, or actually some Northerners as well, with the cash cow program that was run a few years ago in Queensland and Northern Australia. So the cash cow project operated over a number of years, looking at a number of different country types, from Broome across down as far as Gundawindi, considering southern forest to the northern forest. And I use this to locate for a run a couple of different variations between northern forest and southern forest, how that might actually be useful in terms of knowing a few things. So this is really just for the livestock guys in the north to throw one in, but might be useful to understand, is that body condition score is the one thing we will talk about in the north to try and ensure that we actually have high numbers of cows actually being able to conceive a calf and to actually rear a calf and to be back pregnant again within 4 months. We know that body condition and having lower body condition has a big impact on how many animals are either non-pregnant or missing out of the system, basically because they died. But what we actually found, part of cash cow, which is a really neat outcome, is that in addition to body condition score, if you have within your season going into the dry season, less than 2,000 kilos of dry matter per hectare, the actual mean percentage of pregnant cows missing is about 15%. The lowest was down at about 11%, and uppers was about 18%. So we're about nearly 8% more cows missing or not pregnant than if you had cows in that better body condition score. So basically there's a couple of messages there. One is the body condition score, which we'll talk about another seminar someday. But when we match that against how much feed have you got, that can help explain really how you might plan your strategies for the start of the dry season, or how you might manage some of those cows. So if we were to take that cash cow lesson and look at that and think about that peak, that peak impact, and line that up on the report I just showed you. So here's an example of a southern forest location. This is the dry seasons lined up against here for this particular property going back for the last 6 years. And what we've looked at and we're able to see is that if that red line is that 2,000 kilo benchmark from cash cow, in the last 6 years, we've just managed to get there. And we've just managed to get there with the result really of some accumulated feed and a little bit of carryover feed. Now, having an understanding of that can then allow that particular land manager to make some very clear decisions about how they might draft their animals up beforehand, what paddocks they might choose to allocate to ensure that those cows actually are in those properties that have in those parts of the property that have got higher than that 2,000 kilos, and that they might have the appropriate supplements on hand. So that's a really effective way to look at some historical trends and start to address some key areas that we can start to look at. Within I guess the broader context, and a lot of us at the moment are thinking about what the season may or may not do. I spend a lot of time helping people make decisions about drought management and those decisions about whether we feed livestock or we destock. And having an effective drought management plan really requires a couple of things. Firstly, it needs a very clear set of plans and decisions that are based on clear, well-defined trigger points. And if we are going to feed livestock, we need to effectively meet those demands for energy on a daily basis. One of the big challenges for a lot of people is that how we choose our supplements and how we integrate those supplements is always a little bit of a challenge. And I've started to use the AFM to help shape that a little bit better. Often what we talk about when we talk about protein supplementation, we're talking about stimulating the rumen to utilize dry feed. So when we talk about that carryover feed or that feed that is accumulated that we look at, but not all protein supplements are the same. And so those of you who might have heard me speak at drought sessions or on livestock management know that I talk very much about the idea of protein supplements having a window of usefulness. So when you've got more than 2,500 kilos of dry standing matter, any choice of supplement will work for you. Blocks, roller drums through to lupins and white cottonseed. All of those will provide sufficient protein to stimulate your rumen, and you should be able to drive intake to meet livestock demands. However, once you start to fall below 2,500 kilos, and in that range of 25 to 1,500 kilos, which I've highlighted as the amber color, what we actually have there is that these products, such as blocks and roller drums, really are designed to provide protein. We're still having animals having an energy shortfall, and so your animals will still continue to lose weight. Whereas the option of protein meals, pellets, lupins, and cottonseed has a balance of energy and protein. So we stimulate rumen function, we drive intake, but we top up that little bit of energy deficit by the energy that's contained in those products. The problem with that is we stimulate rumen function, we drive intake, we consume our way to below 1,500 kilos, or the pasture declines because of the season. And what we get then is a situation where none of those products is really efficient in terms of conserving our livestock body condition or meeting the needs of our livestock to drive their consumption and their energy intake. So you'll find that blocks and roller drums have got no place when we have less than 1,500 kilos. And the effectiveness of a meal or a protein pellet or a lupin is also quite marginal. So that's pretty basic rumen science and livestock feeding. But let's put that in the context of the AFM information that we can generate. Excuse me. So again, we can look at this map. And if we can have a look at that graph that I showed you before, this green line shows us that period of time for this particular location where that feed has been greater on average than 2,500 kilos. So yes, we're above the 2,000 kilos that might be useful for our benchmark for cash cow. But if we were really wanting to supplement our livestock and we thought that it would be efficient to do with protein blocks or with a roller drum, there's really only a couple of years where that would have been a beneficial process to do. We would have probably found that the response and the costs would not have been justified given the point where we don't have enough feed to drive that. If we then have a look at that window between 1,500 kilos and 2,500 kilos, you'll see that the window is a little bit larger, and there's a few more years where we can actually start to have some real effect from molasses mixes or protein meals or so on. But again, when we look at the history of this particular location, you'll see that those windows where we got really good response from actually going through the process of using those feeds, probably a lot smaller than we were planning on. So if you were thinking about looking at your own data, you might go, gee, that was a bit more disappointing than I expected. Then if we were to think about where our cutoff was, down to that 800 kilos where we don't want to implant our ground cover, or we really want to ensure that we're actually meeting livestock needs, that big red window basically overlaps just about every year. Now, if in this location, if we weren't feeding an energy supplement, an energy feed as part of our supplementary feeding program, or reducing our numbers so that we could actually ensure that there was sufficient pasture feed there, we would actually have a really, really disappointing livestock outcome. So the AFM is going to be quite a useful tool for a lot of you to go back and evaluate some of your feeding decisions, but also to think about where you might set your trigger points and how you might plan your feeding strategies or your livestock stocking strategies over time. We can also then go back to those other reports that I showed you the option of downloading. There are a number of different reports that we can actually provide you with in terms of ground cover and woody vegetation. Excuse me. So lantana is considered to be woody vegetation there, but it's not actually considered to be part of a primary forest. So it's a part of a secondary forest. But what we can see is ways to start to demonstrate the level of change either on seasonal ground cover against rainfall targets going back to 1990 to 1996. And we can see on those increments where our rainfall events were, our area meeting our ground cover targets, historically what the average is for that particular farm based on those land parcels. And similarly, a same level of detail for that land parcels for forest and sparse woody vegetation change. So again, that might be quite useful information for you if you were looking for ground cover reports or woody vegetation reports that you might be interested in. We are also providing forest carbon reports and therefore carbon in living trees in the forest of that particular location. And it consists of both the above ground biomass, which is parts of the living trees, plus the biomass of the roots of the living trees. And this is based on some national standards where we can start to see the accumulation of forest carbon stock and the net forest carbon movement. And for some people, that might be information that they find incredibly valuable or something that they really wanted to start to see to benchmark how they travel. There are, excuse me, the final two things to just, I guess, to highlight for a lot of people is that when they start to use the AFM and they start to see the detail that they can get, become conscious of the variation that exists within their location, particularly the variation across their properties, there are people then who want to actually start to get much better detail and a higher level of resolution down to paddock scale. So at the AFM at the free level, we provide that for free to AFM members or MLA members, and it's that 1 hectare basis that I spoke to you about before on a 30-day rolling average. So you get a month-to-month change. We update that every 5 days. The subscription service that we originally developed, the PastureKey service, operates at a much higher resolution. We operate at 10 square meters. We update it every 5 days, but it's a 15-day rolling average. And we can actually now provide paddock level data. So this is one of our PastureKey locations, and each of those squares that or polygons that you can see there is actually paddocks for the particular property. When we look and progress for those people who've progressed across to PastureKey from the AFM, what they actually get, you'll see, is that much finer detail for each of their locations. So you can see the variation and the variability that exists within paddocks much more clearly than you might see on that coarser 1 hectare resolution. And for those of you who know how much variation you can get within a hectare, this starts to help you ease that out. So that becomes quite useful, particularly for people who really want to drive their grazing management and their fodder budgeting. And in doing that, what we can actually start to provide you with is things such as the total standing dry matter on average, but we can calculate the actual amount of food on offer for that particular paddock, which you can then plug directly into your feed budget system. Or if you were to use something like AgriWeb, it will actually load directly into AgriWeb for you. We can then, at that higher level, because you're paying for a little bit more detail, we can actually start to give you the variation from the highest amounts of food on offer on your property to those areas that are actually to be concerned about because they're in the lower level. Our food on offer is calculated by using the total standing dry matter multiplied by a paddock area after the forest and woodland areas that have got more than 20% tree cover have been excluded. We can also show you, rather than a quality measure, what we can actually provide you is, I guess, a basic overview of what we call fractional cover, which highlights for you the areas of pasture growth, pastures that are not growing, and pastures that are a mix of green and dead material. So it really reflects what's happening within the paddock. So while we might look at these areas and go, oh, gee, it's purple, it's not growing, if we were to go back and look at that particular location, you'll see that some of those paddocks have got a reasonable amount of feed in them, or they're on that yellow, and that's because there's less feed in there, but they're being driven, there's extra feed being driven through that river watercourse or so on. We also can provide you with a number of different levels of information at that subscription. What we encourage producers to do is to bring both of their subscriptions together, where they can actually have their AFM and their PastureKey together. The AFM gives them that broader overview, the historical changes and the graphs. But when we start to then look down at the PastureKey level at the individual paddocks, we can see that much finer detail. So it does give you, I guess, a scope of ways to go as potential users, to go from a basic overview to much more finer detail. So there is a progression for you if you wanted to take that. For those of you who've tried to log in and have had some difficulties, I'll answer any questions that we might have now and try to address any of those. If you have specific issues with the AFM, I'd really encourage you to contact our email through support@cibolabs.com.au. If you have issues associated with your MLA membership, then you do need to contact MLA directly by contacting them through their MLA membership email or their 1-800 number, which I showed to you before, which is on the MLA portal. So I am going to now stop sharing. I'm going to restart my camera, and I'm happy now to answer any questions that may actually be have come up.
Hey, Al, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Sorry, my earphones weren't working. There are some questions in the chat there. Did you see those, fellas?
Yep. So I'm just going to quickly, how does the AFM compensate country? We say 40 to 80% canopy. Okay. The issue is, quite frankly, here that we can't actually see through the trees. So we're not reporting on that when we have that level of canopy cover. We're encouraging people to still try and use our Survey 123 collection app, which allows us to collect field data through transects and pasture assessments and submit that to us. We are using the machine-based learning to help with our predictions, but we still can't overcome the fact that the satellite can't actually see through those particular locations. So we know there's feed there. We just can't tell you how much because we can't physically see through it. Dan, so do the farm links that are shared with a third-party subscriber count under the 25? Okay. So if you, Dan, choose to buy a third-party subscription and you choose to buy for 25 farms, then you can only have those 25 farms shared with you. If you want more shared with you, you can either buy a larger subscription, or you can actually make sure that you remove some of those farms that have been shared with you if you're not accessing them anymore. Woody weeds, I think I covered for Fiona. And I think that's all the questions that I can see in the chat at this point.
Right, Al, is anyone there keen to just turn their camera on and their microphone if they actually have a question they just want to ask? Very happy if anyone wants to get on. You've given them all the information they need, Al.
Very conscious that that there's a lot of information to take on board, and I appreciate that that there's I guess a little bit of frustration at times to go through that, but we'll have this recording available, and we're also able to talk to you if you send us an email and help you work through with that one.
Patrick, did you want to say something? I just saw your camera come on.
Yeah, I did. Alistair, we're in southern Victoria, and we grow summer active species and winter active like cocksfoot and tall fescues. Now, the winter actives tend to flower early and go to head if they're not grazed off or not adequately grazed off, and form a dark, flower head. But the summer actives might form a flower head, but also have a lot of green leaf underneath them. But you look at the paddock visually and you see a lot of brown. And I'm just wondering whether the Feedbase Monitor can differentiate between florets that are brown, that have green underneath them, green leaf, and flowers that are brown and some are dormant and so have dry feed underneath it. Because the differentiation after a storm like we've just had in the last few weeks is we've got a massive green leaf under dry heads.
Yeah.
So is there any solution there?
So there are two things that are going on there for us, Pat. So the satellites are picking up the color differentiations between green and dead, because remember the satellite is looking directly down, which is often different to how we look at pastures because we tend to look more laterally across paddocks. So it will pick up the color differences. The challenge has been, particularly in the south, and we've really been working very hard in the last 18 months or a little bit longer in terms of our ground truthing and collecting information for both summer and winter species to actually do pasture cuts and look at the difference of green and dead material and the stages of growth. And that information has gone into the machine learning that we've been doing. We collect, I forget like how much is coming in per week, but we have now about 7,000 field sites where people are actually regularly collecting data and submitting that to us, which is constantly picking up those seasonal changes. So yes, the machine is picking up the difference between green and dead. The satellites are then also picking that up and we're getting a prediction. What the AFM doesn't tell you is fractional cover. So fractional cover is green, non-green, which I showed you, which is the subscription. In the AFM, what we're just telling you is that you've got 2,500 kilos of total standing dry matter in this location. Now it's up to you then as the farm manager to go out and look at that and go, okay, I'm going out there in the knowledge that I've got this much feed. I have to work out whether it's any good to me or not. And that's the thing. So it's not going to give you a quality prediction. It's not going to tell you what the species are, and it's certainly not going to tell you how to use it. So my clients on say the Northern Tablelands uses it to try and keep on track of their African lovegrass problem. So they know quite often that where they've got 5,000 kilos of dry matter, go out there and it's African lovegrass. So, how then, I guess, going out there with that knowledge means that they've actually gone out to make that assessment based on, they know there's a heap of feed there. They're just going to go out and find that it's pretty ordinary.
Yeah,
so that's the thing.
I think that's worth pointing out, especially southern, the higher rainfall areas in the south, where you've got things like bent grass and sweet vernals and Yorkshire fogs, and people have got 5,000 kilograms of dry matter, but it's virtually useless because the stock don't like it.
Absolutely. So we're not telling you palatability. Look, we have we've certainly gone through the same challenges in the north and certainly the same challenges in the rangelands country as well. And I guess what we're really trying to say, I mean, I put it this way, is that we could go out and drive our Land Cruiser around the same location all the time and look laterally across and go, gee, I've got a bit of feed or I don't. What the satellite information we can provide shows you how much you actually have. And then you choose whether you drive there and look at it and go, okay, I've got 2,000 kilos and it's rubbish.
Yes.
What am I going to do with it? I can put a supplement on it. I can put some stock some dry stock that I don't mind grazing it with and opening it up. I can do other things with it. But I'm going out and I can make a more informed decision in the first instance rather than driving out there and going, oh, I didn't know this was here. So that's probably the way to think about the capacity of it rather than thinking it's going to predict, everything for you to do that.
Good. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. I just saw Rhiannon's, Rhiannon, your question about the summary graphs. So when you actually open your AFM up and you click on a land parcel, the land parcel data will be graphed for you for that land parcel. When you click on the little teardrop icon that is the front gate, that will accumulate all of the land parcel data together and give you a summary graph for that. And that's actually within the AFM itself under those maps. Perfect. Okay. All right.
Hey, Al, I just had a question on what you were talking with Patrick about. I guess if, for example, 2,000 kilos of dry matter and you go out and if you've got, some species there, is there an opportunity then for you just to do a quick visual assessment and go, look, 30% of the 2,000 kilos is rubbish and my stock won't eat it. So at least it gives you, it's still a visual, but yeah, 2,000 minus say 30 or 40% of bad weeds, at least you've still got a figure in mind, don't you?
Absolutely. And that's, I guess, the point of using this data as I started off with, Ange, is that we want people to make better decisions and more accurate, more timely decisions. And how we do that is the data that you have. If you go out there in the first instance and go, oh, I've got a heap of feed there and 30% of it's crap, but how much of the other do you have to play with is always the question mark. And we know we learned this during the drought. We learn at every drought. We consistently overestimate how much feed we have, and we consistently underestimate how much our livestock need. And when we combine that overestimation of feed and underestimation of how much we need, we often run into trouble much quicker than we realize. This is a way of helping, I guess, improve that ability to make a decision, knowing that this is how much we've got on average to start with. Now, if we know the range and we look, at the very lowest it's this and the very highest it's that, then you've got a capacity to start to play.
True, isn't it? We do talk about, don't we, ground truthing it. So with the satellite data and this, the AFM is very useful, but it doesn't actually negate that actual, you're still eyes on the ground, just going and what we call ground truthing, checking, you've got that data and then just add it to the data and the knowledge and understanding you have got of your property and your species.
Absolutely. The point that I constantly come back to is that the most precious resource for producers is their time. If we can use our time more efficiently and effectively, which is going out prepared to know how much, but by knowing how much there is, to look at it and go, okay, it's a better quality than I expected. This changes my assessment, or it's worse than I expected because it's all fog, or it's cooler tie grass, or it's some other thing. Gee, that changes what I have to try and do. So it does give you that. But it's also then this capacity to look back and look at your past experiences and go, here are some areas that we've neglected, and this is potentially an improvement, something that we can control.
Thanks, Al. Look, I think this AFM, I know it's evolved over the years and it's just a fabulous product for livestock managers and feed-based managers, I just wish when I was looking after cattle and horses that I had this to actually give that broad overview and then apply it to what was happening and to get to a really tight, rather than going out and doing the whole quadrants and hoping that you were somewhere close and having to put it in the microwave and all that stuff we used to have to do, of course. But look, has anyone else got any questions before we let Al go? Well, look, from my end, and I'm sorry about the crackly at the beginning, my earphones apparently were playing up. Look, Al, thank you so very much. It's been a really great session. everyone, there is another session tonight at 6 o'clock. Al's coming back because, some of our colleagues during the day that, they might be out actually looking after their livestock. So we are doing another session at 6. So Al is nice enough to come on again. But actually, before we sign off, it looks like Jack's just got a question for you, Al.
Can you speak to the potential using fractional cover teams as far as Yeah, Jack. Okay. It's a good question. So we are part of one of our projects is actually working with some of the fire authorities in terms of the data that we're using and the data that we have to actually help do a prediction on, I guess, the risk of fire. The problem that I would say in terms of the AFM is that we're not able to tell you green or dead. We're not providing you the fractional cover. So you have got, I guess, the assessment that you have to make yourself in terms of how much green or how much dead might you have to be concerned about. In terms of then fractional cover, if you're using PastureKey and you were looking at the amounts that you had and you were looking at significant amounts that were dead, you certainly could start to go, well, these are the key risk areas for me. These are key risk locations that I might want to be concerned about, given that they are on fractional cover dead or predominantly dead with a little bit of green in there, and that amounts are much higher than we can do that. We are providing, and I might just, and I possibly should have showed this to you before, but one of the other options that we can show you and may help in terms of doing this, Jack, is our national comparison, which is just in our general Cibo Labs homepage. You don't have to sign in for this. You don't need to have an account. Under our products, we can choose the national comparison, and the national comparison is based on obviously a national comparison, and we can change our layers to show you, if you like, the amount of dead material, and we can break that down onto land parcels or onto a catchment basis. So if I take that off, we can scroll down and you can go down to catchment levels. So you can see the total amounts of dry standing matter that we have in each of those areas. And that might be something that where we've got total amounts of dead material, large amounts of dead material in some of those catchments, we might actually, and you can see, for example, up here. So there is that national comparison. So you can access and start to use that without actually being a PastureKey subscriber. If you're looking to sort of look at the regional comparisons, or you can look at the amount of green material that we have in a particular location. It looks pretty grim when you look at it, but if we were to go down and look at, since Patrick's on the call, we'll look at the Yarra River catchment. We can scroll down to that level to see what the amount of green, there's quite a lot of green material, smaller amounts of green coming through, and you can see how that might change as the season progresses, and you can see spring starting to kick through. So there are those tools there that might help you also in terms of predicting that. Okay. No, Angie turned off.
I said, nice one, Al, and that's an incredible tool that I think we can use for lots of things. And I know that you guys, as you always have, Cibo Labs, you're always continuing to improve and evolve this thing. So as Al said before, I think if any of you have any trouble and you're really wanting to use this and you're having a go at it and just have a stumbling block, don't sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just send an email or, get onto Al, and they're really, really helpful. And Al, as you can see from this presentation, he's excellent at explaining things and supporting people. That's his role with Cibo Labs. So just feel free, to reach out if you're having troubles, because it is a really amazing tool. Look, I think, Al, are we nearly?
I'm pretty happy. Angie, if you are, thank you very much for all of you being able to put the time aside. Come back again tonight if you want, but certainly feel free to shoot us an email through support@cibolabs.com.au if you have any questions or you'd like to know a little bit more. Follow us on Facebook, give us a like. We like to share what we're doing and to share the projects that we're doing across the country. We're really excited about what we do. We're really excited about the links we have across the industry and with other land management and with industry programs, and we're really keen to keep our relationship with Landcare growing. So we hope to see you all very soon sometime.